Okay, we're live. We're going to try this out. Everything looks alright at the moment. Good morning. Welcome to Abundant Life Homestead, where 4 days a week I invite you to join me live here at my desk for a morning Bible study and chat. I do this during my morning quiet time. During normal times most of the year, it is the time that between when my wife goes to work, my kids go to school, and the time when I have to start taking care of my grandmother for the day. But during the summer, the kids are home, and even today Melinda is home. I don't know if she's going to join us or not, but we like to dive into the Word first thing in the morning. We get into it. We get it embedded in our hearts before the distractions of the day, before the stresses and turmoils of the day get a chance to make that foundation for our day. We want the Word of God to be our foundation for the day. And so we don't get real deep into it. We don't get real scholarly and theological about it. We read the Word, we look and see how it hits us, how it affects us, how it connects to our lives, and how we understand it, whether that's a deep understanding or not. And then we discuss. I invite anyone and everyone who's watching to bring up things that jump out to you in these verses. If you read a different translation than what I do, bring up what differences do your translations say. And in doing this, we create a fellowship and a community around this word. And then once the stream is over, we can all carry this word with us. Like I said, we have a foundation in the word. We have something to stand on through the day. So something to stand fast on and hold fast to when those stresses and turmoils start. And we have the opportunity to dwell on the word more and connect the word to our lives, see it in our daily lives, see how the word is literally a lamp into our feet and light into our path. And by the night watches, when we really truly have embedded this word into our heart, we do have a much deeper understanding and a much better connection with it. And I'm hoping everything stays good this morning. If you followed us Monday, we had no internet connection through most of the weekend, and this morning it went out again just a few minutes ago. I went several minutes without any internet. I can see on my screen the messages where everything was disconnected and then finally reconnected right there at 8:15. So hopefully it stays up. We have a broadband connection, but we're at the mercy of several relay stations between our antenna and the service provider. And it seems that there's been some trouble in those lately. Good morning, Sold Out. Good to have you with us. Always a blessing. This morning is Wednesday. On Wednesday, we generally read a Old Testament passage. And this week we are reading 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. Now, we started in 2 Kings a couple weeks ago. We talked a little bit about Elijah. And then last week we talked about Elisha picking up the mantle of Elijah as Elijah was taken up to heaven. Good morning, weirdos outside. Good morning to you, my friend. I don't know if I've watched every single video you've put out, but I do try to follow them, and I really enjoyed when you were trying to put together the other day the person you love loving the things that you love. I really connected with that, with thinking about Melinda, my wife, when she attempts to get into the things that I love. We can call you Richie. Okay. I am terrible with names, but I will attempt to call you Richie. 2 Kings chapter 5, Melinda. Do you want a microphone this morning, or?
My voice is in and out right now.
Okay. Melinda is here this morning, but she said her voice isn't doing too great, so she's not going to pick up a microphone this morning.
Naaman?
Yeah, it's about Naaman. Of course it's about Naaman. It's in... Alright. Sold Out says, welcome, Melinda. Good morning. She says, thank you. A couple Wednesdays a week, she doesn't go to her regular job. She does her work for the church on the Wednesday. So she'll sit with us. Sometimes she takes a microphone, sometimes she doesn't. Sometimes she gives her input, sometimes she doesn't. But then here in just a little bit, probably about the time the stream is over, she'll head into the church and into her office there and do her work there. Yes, it's very... Richie says, that's awesome. It's a tremendous feeling to see my wife enjoying the things I've always enjoyed the most. Yeah, it's really good feeling when those you are close to get into the things that you are close to. It's a wonderful thing.
And then you combine them and plant me flowers.
Huh?
I said, and then you combine them and plant me flowers.
She says, and then I combine things and I plant her flowers. Which I do. I would rather spend my time and my handwork planting food, but I know how much Melinda likes flowers, so I will give a little bit of that, a little bit of my time, my energy, the thing I love to do, getting in the dirt and work and taking care of and nourishing plants. I'll give a little bit of that to flowers just for her. Whenever you're done making noise back there, I'll start reading. Huh?
So you're waiting on me?
Oh, I was just waiting on you, yeah. I was being mean about it. I said whenever you're done making noise, I'll start reading. Okay, so 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14, and this is the Amplified titles this as Naaman is healed. Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram or Syria, was considered a great man by his king, and was highly respected, because through Naaman the Lord had given victory to Aram or Syria. And he was also a man of courage, but he was a leper. The Aramaeans, or the Syrians, had gone out in bands as raiders and taken captive a little girl from the land of Israel, and she waited on Naaman's wife as a servant. She said to her mistress, I wish that my master Naaman were with the prophet who is in Samaria, then he would heal him of this leprosy. Naaman went in and told his master, the king, the girl who is from the land of Israel said such and such. Then the king of Aram or Syria said, Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel, Jehoram the son of Ahab. So he left and took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, and it said, And now when this letter comes to you, I will have sent my servant Naaman to you, so that you may heal him of leprosy. When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in shock and outrage at the request, and said, Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man sends to me a request to heal a man of leprosy? Just consider what he is asking, and see how he is seeking an opportunity for battle with me. Now when Elisha the man of God heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent word to the king, asking, Why have you torn your clothes? Just let Naaman come to me, and he shall know that there is a true prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stopped at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you will be clean. But Naaman was furious and went away and said, Indeed, I thought he would at least come and see me, and stand and call on the name of the Lord God, his God, and wave his hand over the place of leprosy, and heal the leper. Are not Anna and Paraphar, the rivers of Damascus and Aram, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in rage. Then his servants approached him and said, My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he has said to you, Wash and be clean? So he went down and plunged himself into the Jordan 7 times, just as the man of God had said, and his flesh was restored like that of a little child, and he was clean. Okay. So, story starts out with Naaman. Hang on, I got a side note here. Let's see. He was also a man of courage. The Hebrew translated leprosy actually is a general term for skin diseases, and whether true leprosy as we know it today, Hansen's disease, or another disease is in view depends on the context. It is likely that Naaman suffered from true leprosy as we know it because both the girl and Jehoram seem to think that only a miracle can cure him. Yeah, when it comes to the actual leper, you have something to say? Oh, okay. You were talking to your cat. Okay. When it comes to what leprosy was, we don't necessarily know for certain what leprosy was. We have a disease today that we call leprosy. That is a pretty terrible thing, and it seems to be that leprosy could have been, and maybe was, many unknown and untreatable skin diseases. But it seems to be that the worst of leprosy was like some kind of necrotizing, where it would start killing off the skin, and then the hair would fall out, and the fingernails would fall out, and the teeth would fall out, and then body parts would start dying. It was a terrible thing. The person was wasting away, decomposing while they were still alive. At least in the descriptions they give of it, the worst of leprosy was that way. But we have Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria. He was considered a great man by his king and was highly respected, because through Naaman the Lord had given victory to Aram. It is widely thought in Jewish tradition that Naaman was the one who fired the arrow that killed King Ahab when God allowed Israel to be defeated by Syria. And as I said, Jewish tradition believes that it was Naaman who was the one who killed Ahab, and this verse kind of backs that up. Through Naaman, the Lord had given victory to Aram. And we'd have to go back into 2 Kings to see that story where they propped Ahab's body up in his chariot, but it was too late. He was bleeding out. He was dying. So the Lord handed over a victory to Syria over Ahab, and I don't remember if Jehoshaphat, his wife, was killed at the same time, but God had allowed Israel to be defeated in a major way at this time, and he did it through Naaman. So Naaman's name was known, it seems at least known throughout Israel, throughout at least Samaria, at least where we're talking now. He was also a man of courage, as other translations would put it. He was I assume they would say he was a mighty man of valor. Yeah, King James word.
It says valiant soldier.
Okay. What translation are you reading?
It's actually NIV.
Okay.
It doesn't match any other NIVs that I have.
Okay. Melinda says she's in the NIV, but it doesn't match her other NIVs. Maybe it's a newer revision.
Oh no, it's older.
So he was a what soldier?
Valiant.
A valiant soldier. Okay. He was a mighty man of valor. I always have to chuckle when I hear mighty man of valor, because that's what, while Grandpa was still alive, he called my children, my 3 boys,
Gideon.
Caleb and Gideon and Jacob. They were his mighty men of valor. And but biblically, back into the Bible, this Naaman is the only Gentile who was ever mentioned as a mighty man of valor. But he had this huge problem. He's a leper. He has this leprosy. Mm-hmm.
You might be getting ahead.
Here.
But because of this issue,
Mm-hmm.
he had a great encounter with God.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually a side note I had in here. But so sometimes these terrible things happen so that you can become closer to God.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a choice: dwell and become nothing, or seek God and become great.
And you know, from that, can you try to put that back on there? from the way I see it, when you're saying that. Sorry, folks, we're having some technical difficulty here. Microphone stand is disconnected. You can pull the clip off of the stand, I believe. There you go. I'll just hold this here for a second. Sold Out says that he's reading from the New King James, and it also reads "Mighty Man of Valor." Yeah, Mighty Man of Valor is a common term that they use for these men. Oh, well, I say common, but I think it's only like 6 or 7 maybe people that were ever mentioned as mighty men of valor. And Naaman was the only Gentile. He was the only non-Jew mentioned in the Bible as a mighty man of valor. Go the wrong way. Okay, you're fine. You're fine. We can make it work even through technical problems. But the Arameans had gone out in bands as raiders and taken a captive a little girl from the land of Israel, and she waited on Naaman's wife as a servant. What you were saying was that God, he had this terrible thing happen so that he would have a choice with God.
Mm-hmm.
Something along those lines. When the microphone fell apart, you know, I see it like that. You know, either God can put you in that circumstance, and where he uses you through that terrible thing, or that terrible thing happens, you know, because being given free will, sometimes it's not leprosy, sometimes it's not a bacteria or disease, sometimes it's someone doing a terrible thing to us. And it is not inconceivable, it's not something that for not to happen. God can take that terrible thing that has been done to us and make good of it, make an opportunity out of it. So Naaman has been overcome with this leprosy, and God can use that as a way for Naaman to not only build his own faith, but take that faith back with him to Syria. Are we good here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hopefully.
It's tight.
Okay. But the little girl, it doesn't tell us much about the little girl other than she was an Israelite girl. She's taken into servanthood. She's taken away from her family. She's a captive. She's a prisoner and turned into a slave girl and happens to be in Naaman's house. She is the servant of Naaman's wife. And she says to her mistress, or Naaman's wife, I wish that my master Naaman were with the prophet who is in Samaria, then he would heal him of his leprosy. So this little girl, despite the terrible things that's happening to her, she held on to her witness. You know, how often do we do that? How often do we find ourselves in a position where things are just going terrible and the world is oppressing us, and we end up in this bad position, and we start feeling and thinking and even saying that God has abandoned us or God is punishing us? We don't hold on to our witness when we're in a terrible situation, but this little girl did. And with this witness, she becomes almost a compelled or forced missionary. She's in a foreign land, and she remembers and brings her witness with her, and she brings it up to the wife. I don't think she actually said. Yeah, she said it to Naaman's wife, not necessarily to Naaman. She may have not had any contact with him because of his leprosy. But in this terrible thing that has happened to her, this becoming, it says servant, but we know personal slaves were treated a lot better than slavery as we know it here in America. But still, she was a slave girl. She was a prisoner. And she brings her witness with her, and she not only brings it, but she testifies. She speaks. She lets it out. She tells of her witness, even through her terrible times. So something that I think, I could even pinpoint times when I have failed to do so. When I have got into that, we're in a terrible situation. It is so hard for me to witness, to share God's love when I'm not feeling God's love. But this little girl, she shows more strength than most of us do in that witness. But she says, I wish that my master Naaman were with the prophet who is in Samaria, then he would heal him of his leprosy. So Naaman went and told his master, the king, the girl who is from the land of Israel said such and such. She told him that he could be healed. And Sold Out says, what if I stumble? What if I fall? Yeah, that's very much the thought of that. What if I stumble? What if I fall? Is what holds us back. More often than not, I think, yes.
It's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you get up.
Melinda says it's not how many times we fall, it's how many times we get up. Richie says, that's exactly where I was just a few years ago with drug addiction. I reached a point of complete despair. I never lost my belief in God, but I felt as though He had abandoned me. Yeah, and that I can't imagine just what you've been through with that, but I know those times where we fall, where we feel that, where we feel so much despair. You know, I was in a previous marriage that was very oppressive in that way. As I've said before, the first weekend after we got married, I was getting ready to go to church. The woman I married, we grew up together in the church. And the first Sunday, I was getting ready to go to church, and she looks at me and says, "You don't actually believe that crap, do you?" The moment she was free, she had that freedom away from her parents. The moment we were married together, she abandoned all of that, and she never, to this day, as far as I know, she never stepped foot in a church again. But there was so much oppression and despair. It's like I didn't let go of my faith, but also felt like I had been abandoned. And here's Melinda. Hang on, let me see what Richie said. Oh, Sold Out says, yay and amen. Richie says, now I'm able to use my experience to provide hope for others and to point them to God. Here's Melinda.
That's exactly what I use my story for, because like Jonathan, I was in a previous marriage, but I was not raised in the church. And my point got to where I was going to commit suicide because I just wanted the pain to end. And I was blessed with the audible voice of God stopping me. But like you said, it was Richie. I can't say your scene. Like Richie, I use this story because I was in an abusive situation. It was just not pretty. But God took that pain and now I'm able to use it for good. My first sermon, I had multiple people coming to me, thanking me, because it's not something people talk about. And they need these stories to know that God makes good of our situations. And as low as we are, we can help others once they reach that point. And just like Naaman, I mean, he was so low, he listened to a slave girl. I mean, you didn't talk about that, but nobody listened to the slaves. They don't know anything. But he was out of options, just like we were. We were out of options, and we took this horrible thing and said, okay, God, here you go. And he's like, all right, let's see what we can do with this, and makes more out of it than we possibly can imagine.
You know, I was actually thinking a little bit of that as I'm talking here and thinking ahead of what I read in the story and what to bring up. You know, it's Naaman in his position as this great military commander. He's a second to the king. I mean, we see, especially if we read on through Kings, that his master was the king. There was no one in between Naaman and the king. He was a second to the king. And for him to be such an important and high figure, but to have to become so humble, not only through the leprosy, and not only through, as we read here, but for him to be so humbled, so humiliated, so humbled by God that he had to listen to a slave girl, that he needed to take the advice of a slave girl. But God was working through Naaman and working through that slave girl to bring them together, to bring this all about.
But not only Naaman, the king.
Yeah.
Because the king should have been like, no, she's a slave girl. That's stupid.
Very, very, very true. The king didn't have to listen to that. And I mean, you know, in my view, as Naaman brought it up, you know, the king would have very greatly trusted Naaman. So, you know, kind of thinking Naaman wouldn't have brought this up if it wasn't important. Naaman wouldn't have said that the slave girl said this if Naaman didn't believe it himself. Sold Out says, thank you, Melinda. Your analysis is spot on and fitting to now times. So the king of Syria says, go now, I'll send a letter to the king of Israel, Jehoram, the son of Ahab. And he took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 shekels of gold and 10 changes of clothing. Now, we don't use talents and shekels nowadays, but a talent is believed to be somewhere, the Hebrew talent, not the Greek talent. The Hebrew talent is believed to be about 75 pounds. So we're talking 750 pounds of silver. And a shekel is somewhere around 10 grams. So 6,000 grams of gold, we're looking at about 132 pounds. So 750 pounds or so of silver, 132 pounds or so of gold. This would be a huge fortune in anybody's eyes. In today's money, we're talking like $4 million. He's I don't know just what's going through the mind of the king here, other than he wants his top commander to be healed, but it's almost like he's trying to buy his healing. He's trying to pay for his healing. I don't see the money part as a peace offering so much as a payment. Say, here, go to their God, take all this money, and you will be healed. And unfortunately, we do kind of see this sentiment sometimes in today in society, where people pay for God. They pay for healing. They don't necessarily, they don't understand God. They've never had that relationship with God, but they've already got God figured out. They've got him in a box. If we give a bunch of money to God, he's going to do great things for us. The king sends a huge fortune. As I said, probably it's going to be, without doing exact math and all this, it's going to be over $4 million. A big fortune he sends with him to pay for Naaman's healing. So Naaman brings a letter to the king of Israel. And it said, "And now when this letter comes to you, I will have sent my servant Naaman to you so that you may heal him of his leprosy." And before I comment on that, I've got a side note. It is clear from, it gets into Jehoram's reaction. It is clear from Jehoram's reaction that the letter expressly asked him to heal Nahum. It is possible there was a misunderstanding on Nahum's part or on the part of the Aramean king. More likely, the language of the request was in accordance with royal protocol, giving credit for the healing to the king of Israel, who, it was expected, would send Nahum to Elijah and not take the request literally. Well, one way or another, even if the king didn't take it literally, we see here what happens. The king Jehoram reads the letter, tears his clothes. We talked about tearing of the clothes last week when Elisha saw Elijah go up into heaven, when he realized he had lost his master. Tearing of the clothes was this traditional ceremonial way of showing your grief. It real grief, real distress, real panic. You would tear your clothes. That's exactly what Jehoram did. He tore his clothes. He whether he took this letter literally, which it kind of seems he did, that he says, "Am I God? Am I to kill and to make alive? This man sends me a request to heal a man of leprosy." Whether he took it that the king literally did want Naaman healed, or he also took it that the king of Syria was making this a challenge, so that if he didn't do this, then there was going to be a battle. He's seeking an opportunity for battle with me. Let's see. Again, on the tearing of the clothing. Side note says it was a religious obligation among the Jews to tear one's clothing as a sign of grief or of horror and outrage over blasphemy. Here, Jehoram the king does it because he has been asked to perform something which only God can do. And knowing, and we'll get into this in a minute. Knowing where this is going, knowing where Jehoram is coming from, I would almost say that Jehoram didn't know that God could do this so much, because Jehoram did not have a good relationship with God. Jehoram did not have a good relationship with Elisha. Elisha was not welcome at the temple. The God of, or not the temple, the palace. Elisha was not welcome at the palace. The God of Israel was not welcome in Israel at this time. And that very much is why God handed the victory over to Syria. That's very much why King Ahab, Jehoram's father, was killed in battle. And Jehoram didn't necessarily learn anything from that lesson, because God was still not welcome in the palace. Let's see. Luke. Good morning, Luke. Luke is back with us. Luke, replying to Sold Out, says, "We all fall and stumble." Psalm 103:14, "For he knoweth our frame, and he remembereth that we are dust." Yea and amen. So Jehoram he's in distress. He's in horror. He's assuming that they're about to get attacked again. He's assuming that this is just the king of Syria is making a mockery with sending this money, because he's about to come. He's looking for an opportunity to do battle. He knows that the king's just going to come back and take this money and probably take his life the same way his father's life was taken. But then Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes. You know, word travels fast in a small town. Gossip happens. Elisha finds out not just that the king has torn his clothes, but why and what is happening. And then Naaman is there. So he sends word to the king asking, "Why have you torn your clothes? Just let Naaman come to me, and he shall know there is a true prophet in Israel." Much of what we've already talked about, this is kind of like Elisha giving a jab at the king. Why have you torn your clothes? This could have been avoided if you would have had a relationship with the God of Israel. Why are you in such distress? This would be unnecessary if God was welcome in the palace. If the prophet of God was welcome in the palace, this would be unnecessary. Send him to me, and then he'll know that there's a prophet in Israel, because he's never gonna find the prophet of Israel in the palace of Israel, because the prophet's not welcome there. Send him to me. Send him to me. Let's handle this. Let's get this taken care of. So he kind of sends that jab at Jehoram, but the message gets through. Nahum comes to Elisha's house, his horses, his chariots, probably all of his servants. We see later, after he's healed, if you read further than the study takes us, that all of his servants come back with him. So we assume that there's a large group there at this time. And again, we see Naaman has had some experience with God. God used Naaman in battle. Naaman had enough faith to believe this little servant girl, this little slave girl, that God could heal him. He had enough faith that he traveled to a foreign land for this healing, for God. He traveled into Samaria. He had enough faith for that. He had enough faith that he goes to Elijah's house, and those little occurrences, those little experiences with God and with starting to build this faith was all it took for Nahum to put God in a box. He's got God all figured out at this point. He knows what God's going to do, and since he was a great and mighty person, God's going to do it this way for him. But it doesn't happen that way. Elisha sends out a messenger. Elisha doesn't even come and face him, and tells him to go do this simple thing: go wash yourself in the river. And Nahum gets pretty upset, because he had God figured out what happened. He had God in that box, and now he's being knocked down. God's not in that box. He didn't have God figured out, or this guy, this dumb prophet in Samaria, he doesn't realize Nahum's power. He doesn't realize that Nahum has already figured God out. And so, but Elisha doesn't come to him face to face, and this is, whether intentional from Elisha or God speaking through Elisha, tells him not to go out and face him. I think this is very intentional to show that it's not the prophet that does the healing. You don't have to necessarily travel to a foreign land and see a prophet in order for God to work through you. It is God that is going to do the work, not the prophet. So the prophet just sends a message to him, tells him to go do this simple thing: go wash yourself in the river 7 times, plunge yourself in the Jordan River 7 times. So again, like we say, Naaman gets furious. He gets upset. He knows. He thought he had God all figured out. He had he had the secret formula. He knew if he followed these steps, God would do that. And he followed these steps, and God didn't do that. So it kind of knocks down his pride. We talked a lot about the pride yesterday, with the man who thinks he is something but is nothing except in his own eyes, has been deceived. Naaman had a little experience with God and had already allowed his heart to be deceived by his flesh in cornering God and molding God and deciding what God was. And Melinda's got something to say.
The request from the prophet comes across as stupid to him. I mean, he'd obviously already tried that. Why should he do it again?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, having skin disorders, what's the first thing you do? You go and you wash it. And for this crazy person to not even come out and speak to him, but to send a message, I think that was the bigger issue, because he hurt his pride. He was someone special, and this guy couldn't even bring himself to come out and look at him.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, having skin issues, it's like, I already did that. That's stupid. But I think the biggest issue isn't the stupid thing he told him to do. It was that he wouldn't bring himself to look upon him.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was getting into, talking about the pride that we talked about yesterday, where you think those who think they're something but are really nothing except in their own eyes. They've been deceived. This guy is second to the king. He's treated in a certain way. Despite his leprosy, he is treated as royalty, and he expects the prophet of Israel to treat him as royalty. He expects God to treat him as royalty. And suddenly his pride is just smashed.
Which is probably why God told Elisha not to look at him.
Many times God needs to smash our pride, to take our pride down a notch. Sometimes, because I think not a one of us often recognizes our own pride and takes that pride down a notch. Yesterday, the men's ministry, we went out in the evening, and I talked about it a bit yesterday. We were going to the house of a man who's in our church. He had several big limbs full, and we were going to help bear his burden. We were going to bear the physical side of that burden. And I can't do a lot of physical stuff, but I have tools, I have equipment. I brought stuff for others to use. And even then, my own pride kind of got a hold of me yesterday. There was times where I was doing more than I'm supposed to do. I was doing things I really shouldn't be doing because of my physical condition. And luckily, people were already watching out for me. People that know me, men that know me and love me, they were there. And it was our pastor, Pastor Neil, that had to take me down a notch a few times. I'm holding onto a rope that's balancing a limb, and he comes up. He's like, let us take that. You go. You step back a minute, or a couple of times. He's like, you tell us what to do. Don't get in here and do this. So my own pride had to be taken down a notch a couple times yesterday. And, we kind of talked about that a little yesterday leading up into it. I kind of knew I was going in with this little bit of pride. But we don't always recognize that pride where we really think we're something. Sometimes we expect to be treated a certain way because of who we think we are. And sometimes God through someone else, God through one of his prophets has to take that down a notch. and I don't think he can't work through us as well. He can't speak to us. He can't fill us unless we've poured out some of that pride. Sold out. To know me is to know that I am a survivor of the evils of a township, and how mistreating me brought down not only a school district but a juvenile home that was razed to the ground. Luke says God hates a proud look. Sold out. Amen. Luke says I failed yesterday.
We fail every day. It's important that we try.
Come in here and say that. Alan Bartlett, hey, good morning, brother. Good to see you. Says thank you for this. I love this study. Well, we greatly appreciate when you are here, and we love you too, Alan.
I said we fail every day. It's important that we get up and try again.
Luke says I fed two. He's the one that says he failed yesterday. Says I fed 2 men with bread, but I didn't feed them with the bread of life. So in other words, you didn't witness and minister to them when you had the chance. Understand that
Maybe someone else was sent to come behind you, and you were only meant to feed them just the bread.
yeah, sometimes it's not necessarily our words. It's not necessarily our words that are needed. It is the showing of that love to each other. It is showing where we fulfill that law of Christ, having this extra and special love for one another, and showing that and giving that and even bearing some of that burden. Giving them the bread is bearing some of that burden. But it's not always our words that are for them. Sometimes it's our actions and someone else's words. Sometimes it's for us to plant seeds, but let someone else come in and nourish those seeds, and then someone else comes in and reaps that harvest. It's not always for us to have the entirety of that job. So if you expose them, if you show them the love of Christ, if they can see Christ in you, even if they don't fully understand, if they see Christ in you without necessarily your words, then you've done okay. You haven't necessarily failed. I think that's something we all struggle with, is using our words to tell each other about Christ. Even myself, I do it so easily in front of camera. And some people I know I can easily talk about Christ with, but there are others where, even though I've known them for years, it becomes difficult to talk about Christ with. So sometimes it's not our words. Sometimes it's just living as Jesus lived, loving as Jesus loved. Sometimes that's our part in their story. Here's Melinda again.
Sometimes the words need to come later, because if they've been hurt significantly by the church, they're not ready to hear those words. Mm-hmm. They need to see the actions first, mm-hmm. and see where your heart is. And once you can show that you don't only have the words to say, but you live by those words, then they're more prepared to listen to those words. And
we're a little...
Yes, but I have a little prayer request too.
Okay.
Because I just got notification that I am now signed up for my courses. So I definitely need prayer on that.
Finishing up for your degree?
Yes.
Coffee House State of Mind says, enjoyed this study today. Have a blessed day. Thank you for joining us, Coffee House. I hope you have a wonderful and blessed day as well. Sold Out says, amen. So it is time for me to move on to other things. I've got to go get Grandma taken care of, so this will be the end of our study for the morning. Greatly appreciate all of you who have joined us. Really love when Melinda joins us in the morning. Coffee House, she says she'll add you to her daily prayer list.
Thank you.
She said, Melinda says, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Hopefully you all get something out of these morning studies. Not necessarily in what I say, not necessarily in what others say, even though that helps bring that light to our feet and lamp into our path. But it's the Word of God that we read. Make connections with that. Carry those connections with you. Give yourself a foundation in the Word to stand on when those stresses come, when those terrible times come. Be able to witness through those times, just as that little slave girl did, and have the faith to take leaps of faith. Like, as Naaman traveled to other countries. Maybe we don't all travel to other countries, but we are asked to do something for God, take those steps, make those leaps of faith, and but have that foundation in the Word before we do. And I think it'll really do a lot to change our lives. Luke says, thank you for the encouragement. Richie says he truly appreciates the study. God bless. Yes, I hope you all have a wonderful and blessed day. God bless you all. I love you all. I truly do. And God willing, I will be back here tomorrow morning, 8:15 a.m. And it looks like we are reading Psalm 30 tomorrow. So we have that to look forward to. Everybody have a wonderful day. Stay cool. And we'll see you then.